live here on Thursday night. A good 20 minutes later than we were supposed to. But what are you going to do? It's 2020. There's no way you had plans tonight. Am I right, Freddie?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we're gonna go with.
I mean, that's the whole point of why we're talking about these Legends books in the first place, because we needed to do something this year. Therefore, why not read the massive back catalog of Star Wars books that I know that you had sitting on your shelf? And if you're anything like me, you've picked up even more Legends books since last episode. Freddie, do you ever have like a big moment in your Legends fandom where all of a sudden you realize that this one thing I always believed was true about Star Wars was pulled out from underneath you and you realize you were wrong the whole time? You have no idea where I'm going with this, do you?
No, I don't. But I'm going through my archive right now in my brain, trying to figure out if there was a moment. And I know there's a couple of situations, but I want to hear your moment.
Like when you're watching the original trilogy, there's always a moment where you pull up the Twitter and you have to say, "I never noticed this detail before. I finally saw the stormtrooper that bumped his head," or something like that. For me, this week I realized I was doing some data entry for utini.com, where you can find amazing curated content such as our 90 plus reading collections, as well as many getting started guides, guides to comics, guides to books, all kinds of great content over there on utini.com. I was doing some work for Utini this week instead of doing my real job, and I found out, Freddie, that for over 20 years now, I have in my brain somehow messed up a title of a Legends book.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Interesting.
It's like we all
Yeah.
have these words that we believe, that we pronounce them a certain way that nobody else does. And somebody corrects you on it, and you're embarrassed. Kind of like the way that Freddy says Bastilla instead of Bastilla, even though she says her name in the dang video game. Freddy's he's out on his own island saying Bastilla. Everybody's got their thing, right? My 13-year-old brother-in-law to this day still says Dark Vader. What are you going to do? How are you going to correct him? I bop him on the head and I say, "Get it right, kid." But for him, like it's a lot to get him to do it the right way. All right, and the book is, ready for this? Drum roll, please. The book I have been mispronouncing all these years, almost just knocked my phone off the table there, is one of the books from the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. Do you have all three of these memorized, Freddie? This has been a big moment in my fandom this week. Is trying to figure out if I know the name of every book in every single Legends trilogy.
I I don't know them. I know the last one. I'm not sure if you're supposed to say the title before me.
How do you say it, Freddie?
Tyrant's Test.
Tyrant's Test. Well, Freddie, for what year did this book come out? I remember reading it when I was like 10, maybe 12 years old. Have not read it since, so that's going to be a fun reread. Unless it's not, and it's a terrible reread. It's definitely going to be one of the two. And for me, all these years, since I was 10 years old, I've been pronouncing this book as Tyrant's Nest. Tyrant's Nest. Like there's a big nest full of tyrants. And they're all just fighting with one another to have authoritarian control of the entire galaxy.
Well,
Tyrant's Nest.
So that sounds like a Star Wars book to me. So
I know, right? It totally could be. And,
I'll give you that one.
For me, it was an absolute Berenstain Bears moment. You know what I'm talking about? There's this this theory that there's an alternate timeline. Right. It's Berenstain Bears. I find it hilarious that for all of these years, I have had it wrong. But wow. You know what? If ever there's a show in which we can celebrate, embrace even the joy of discontinuity, retcons, and alternate timelines, it's on Legends Lookback. Am I right, Freddy?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a really fun episode. I'm pretty excited. When I saw the show notes, and we talked about it just beforehand, but it seems like it's just banter between Star Wars fans. At least that's what it feels like to me. So
yeah, it really does. I don't really remember how I came up with the idea for this episode. This week, we're going to be talking about all of the big hypothetical, weird, what-if, splinter timeline, alternate universes in Legends. I think that it just had to do with the general discontinuity that we're all feeling in 2020. How many times this year have you, esteemed listener, how many times this year have you said, it feels like we're living in an alternate universe? I don't know about you, but for me, I've said it at least 2 or 3 times a week. Is that about the right count, Freddie?
Yeah, I would say it was definitely. I'm at probably number 58 by now. So
Today?
yeah, today.
Um, yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where it really has seemed like, especially this year, we're in this apocalyptic alternate timeline, much like the Berenstain Bears. That's where it all went wrong, Freddie. Whenever the
That's the
timeline
timeline. Yeah.
splintered that resulted in the Berenstain Bears, that's whenever Tyrant's Nest became Tyrant's Test, that's when everything went wrong.
That
And
was the
you
moment.
can take my word for it. You know what else you can take my word for? The fact that this is going to be an awesome show. So without further ado, let's kick it off. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Legends Lookback, a show brought to you by Utini.com, a Star Wars podcast for people who read Star Wars books while listening to the Thundercats theme song on repeat, where we talk all about all things Legends, celebrating our rich EU history as well as diving into lesser-known Star Wars classics. As always, I'm your host, Jared Mays, and today I'm joined once again in the flesh, all the way from the other side of the country, Freddie C. What's up, Freddie?
It's good, man. I'm pretty excited for this episode. I think it's one of those episodes that's gonna get a lot of people thinking, a lot of people talking. So let's see
Yeah.
where it goes, man. I'm pretty excited.
I mean, I've been in 2 grad school classes this week, and I've definitely spent more mental energy on this show than I have on my actual grad school. So hopefully my professor is not watching this. I actually plugged the show to one of my professors, so if he's here, welcome, Dr. Burr. And cannot wait to dive into this crazy content with you. Of course, if you're watching this show live with us on Twitch, this is a show that goes live at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, or at least it's supposed to. 9:30 p.m. Eastern every Thursday night. Of course, if you can't make it live with us, that's absolutely fine because we also post the show each and every week on YouTube. We've got a great community leaving their opinions and thoughts and answering the questions in the chat. Welcome to our YouTube viewers, YouTube listeners, whatever you want to call yourselves. Glad to have you here. And also, we post this show in audio format as well, both every week on Utini's Patreon for all of our incredible patrons, as well as in our very own Legends Lookback feed, where you can subscribe, you can like, you can leave us a review. I don't know where we could find those reviews to read them, but you can leave them. And you'll be doing us one huge Legendsy favor. Of course, as we start the show, we want to say we are preparing a listener feedback show. If you would like to get your thoughts heard on air, you can, of course, preferably email us an audio file at legendslookback@utini.com. You can leave us a voicemail at 508-686-1158. Keep it a respectable length, all right? Like 2 minutes. That seems about right. You could leave a 2-minute voicemail every week if you want, but, don't go over 2. You don't have to, be clocking yourself, but all right, you get the gist. Anyway, welcome to everybody who is with us live. Welcome to everybody who is going to let their thoughts be known with us during the show tonight, because, of course, we're going to be asking some crazy questions, and you can ask some weird what-if questions right alongside us in this very interactive special episode of Legends Look Back. Freddie, as we get started, I've got a Legends confession, man. We did our whole contest, where I've not posted the prize for that. Better make myself a note. Anyway, we did the contest of guessing how many Star Wars books I have. And since then, I have acquired 2 Star Wars books that have come in the mail, and I've ordered another 2 that should come in the mail next week for
I'm
a
pretty
crazy
sure
episode that we're
I was
working
at
on.
fault for those last 2.
Yeah, the last 2, I blame Freddie at least, 45% of the blame. I'll take 45%, and the other 10%. Don't know who to blame. We'll see who crosses me tonight and disagrees with me in the chat. But I do have some, now that we're doing a video show, some fun stuff that I can show off. After our Halloween episode, I now have the hardcover copies of both Red Harvest, if I can get the glare just right, and Death Troopers. Got them both. Red Harvest and Death Troopers. I almost said in the flesh, but in case you can't tell, what is this? Darth, what's his face? Darth Bloodthirsty over here.
Oh.
Um, he's got blood dripping from his lips. So we're not going to talk about flesh with these scary books, but um, incredibly excited to add them to my collection. It felt wrong talking about these books and not owning them in hardcover format last week. So I'm doing my Legends library a favor. Don't you think, Freddy? I'm doing right by Legends by acquiring
Yes.
these.
I mean, you're creating the ultimate library. You know, in the event something happens, we can all go to your house and read all of your Legends books.
You know, that one of these days I'd like to think I could host large groups of people in my house again. One of these days, I'd like to think that's a possibility. What about you, Freddie? Have you picked up any new acquisitions?
I have, and I made a big deal of it. I had no idea that this book existed, mainly because I had not bought this version of Star Wars Galaxies. I don't know
Oh,
if you guys can
beautiful.
see that there,
If we can
but
zoom in.
it's called the From Pencil to Pixel: The Art of Star Wars Galaxies.
You got that in one take, Freddie. Pencil to pixel. I mean, you got to do like vocal warm ups to be able to say that live on air.
Yeah, dude, I'm really excited. So this was part of the collector's edition of Star Wars Galaxies when it released, and it was released with it. So at 2003, yeah, 2003, and it basically goes over all of the characters, the playable characters, the planets that you're going to be visiting, and starships, architecture, etc. So it's pretty amazing. I can't wait to review this book. I've never
Yeah.
seen it before, and guess what? It comes with a trial offer.
Oh, does it?
Of
Beautiful.
Star Wars Galaxies.
But you can't
Yeah,
use anymore, right?
I can't. No, but look at this back cover.
Oh, save that. We're gonna do some kind of an episode before too long. We're working on the details on how we can review some of these art books. It requires a little bit of technological finagling, and in case you can't tell by the fact that we started 20 minutes late tonight, we can barely finagle the audio and the technology we're already trying to work with. But just hang in there. How about you, Meg? Freddie and I have both got some new stuff. I know that you're competitive, Meg. You got any new Legends books you want to show off on the episode?
I don't know why you're calling me competitive right now. I don't understand. I'm just checking my levels. Cool. I have something. Would you like to see it?
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
really excited.
I mean, you're stringing us along
I
here.
know.
I'm salivating at the thought of a Legends book.
Isn't it pretty?
Oh my gosh.
This,
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah, Facebook is great sometimes, and by Facebook is great, I mean sometimes people are selling Star Wars books, and
Yeah, sometimes it turns you
yeah.
into Nazis, and sometimes, you can get Star Wars books.
Yeah, so I got this one, and what else did he send me? Red Harvest and one other hardcover.
Oh, Meg, we can high five our Red Harvests through the Force.
It was weird that happened at the same time. Yeah, I am not like purposely acquiring Legends hardcovers. Like I'm not looking for them, but like I'll take them when I can find them. So yeah.
Awesome. In my defense, compared to I know Meg got a great deal. There's some really rare Legends hardcovers out there. The only Legends hardcovers that I've spent any money on this year have been the affordable, easy to come by. In case my wife is watching this, because sometimes she does, I have not spent too much money on these books. So without further ado, there's one other major piece of Legends news we've got to get into here as we get into the episode proper. Freddie, last week on our episode, we talked about the scariest stuff in Legends, right? We talked about the characters, the books,
Forgetting the names of books.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about the creatures. And one of those creatures that we said was one of the spookiest, scariest, most terrifying creatures in all of Star Wars, especially in Legends, for its standout role in Kenobi by John Jackson Miller, is the Crate Dragon himself. Or herself? Itself. Crate Dragons, man. And little did I know that within hours of our episode airing live, we would be watching a live action Crate Dragon in The Mandalorian. How incredible was that, man?
It's incredible because, if you played the video games, especially Star Wars Galaxies, it had especially if you watched it towards the very end, and they took out. I'm not even sure. I think it was a crate pearl, and
Yeah.
you would actually do that in the game. You would go hunt them. You wouldn't get them all the time, I don't believe, but you would get a really rare drop of a crate pearl. So seeing that, I was jumping out of my chair,
Oh,
screaming,
awesome.
"Crate pearl! Crate pearl!"
Yeah, I was too. Except for I wasn't
So
screaming because my kids were still asleep, and my wife and I had the luxury of watching it before they woke up, which might be the only time all season. We'll see. We're gonna try again for tomorrow. But no, man, it was really exciting, especially in KOTOR. It really played out similarly to the Great Dragon scene in KOTOR on Tatooine.
mm,
The way the dragon, it's more of like a fat lizard in KOTOR than it
yeah.
was in The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian made it more fun, but there was the Great Pearl inside of it, which was a ton of fun. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was one of the most legendsy episodes
Yeah.
of The Mandalorian so far, don't you think?
It was really good. Yeah. We had a conversation with someone on, I believe it was Twitter, who said after watching that, they felt like it was it was very legendsy, but also they were reminiscent of Star Wars Galaxies. So
Oh yeah, our
I
buddy
I
Stephen Kent from
yeah.
Beltway Banthas.
Yeah, that's right. I felt the same way after watching it. It was pretty amazing, and what a call out to Star Wars fans.
Yeah, it was absolutely excellent. If you haven't seen the episode yet, like Skooma Joe hasn't, hopefully that doesn't spoil it too much. We should have given some kind of a spoiler warning. But Skooma Joe, we love you, man. And if that ruined The Mandalorian for you, then you get one license to ruin one Star Wars thing for me at your choosing. And that being said, tonight as we get into the episode, we've had a lot of fun legend stuff happening for us. It has also kind of been a big week, of course, for our U.S. American viewers and listeners. It's been a big week, so tonight is going to be a fun way for us to unwind with some legends and to imagine, what if things played out a little differently? We're doing a lot of that, a lot of projections this week. I've watched more MSNBC than I ever thought I ever would in a single week. Honestly, I deserve one of those medals that Chewie doesn't get at the end of A New Hope. I should get one of those medals for how much MSNBC I've watched this week. And that being said, we've done a lot of saying, well, if things happen this way, then blah 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 blah, right? If the card should fall in this certain way, then here's what's going to look like for the next week, the next 4 years, even if we even make it that long. Who knows, right? And so tonight we're going to be playing the hypothetical legends what if questions palooza extravaganza. I don't know where I'm going with this, but in a lot of ways 2020 has felt like an alternate post-apocalyptic timeline. But Freddie, there really are, if you think about it, several different alternate universes within what we label as Legends itself, don't you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of and we'll talk about it, but there's a lot of links in the chain that if they were to go a different way, we would have gotten a totally different story. So
Yeah,
uh,
especially if you think about it, Legends was back in April of 2014, the EU, all of the Star Wars books and games and comics that ever were, for the most part, right, were declared Legends because, hey, we're going a different direction. We've got a new overlord in town who's going to be doing things a little bit differently. And so basically, all of the books were just declared a perfectly valid, perfectly enjoyable alternate timeline. And hey, this is something that the comics have done for a long time. DC, Marvel, you've got these established stories, established characters, and we're just going to start over. We're going to tell the story a little differently. They can intersect, they can overlap. There's retcons even within the quote unquote canon or established chronology. And Legends does this maybe less than Marvel and DC does in its superhero universes. And yet, if you think about it, Freddie, you got the Marvel comics, which are not especially embraced, just in a couple of ways. They're embraced in the larger world of Legends, but for the most part, they're kind of relegated to that weird stuff over there, right?
yeah, yeah.
We talked last week about Lumaya, or recently, a couple weeks ago, on the Legends Ladies episode, how she's brought over into the Legacy of the Force series. So she's acknowledged, but who's not acknowledged very often? Jackson, the Jedi Rabbit, or whatever he is. He's actually more established and acknowledged in recent canon, mostly thanks to our buddy Kevin Scott. He's more acknowledged in canon than he is in the broader world of Legends. Do you think that's true?
I don't know.
Jackson's continuity. We won't get into this.
Jackson. So I remember when I first read about Jackson and I first saw him as a character, and I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. But then I kind of took a step back and I was realizing, I mean, this is the Star Wars universe. There's tons of aliens, tons of planets. So, I mean, I guess why not?
Yeah. It makes sense. Yoda's basically an old frog, right? I mean, there's not a lot more to him. I told my wife last week, we were watching The Mandalorian, that the banthas are just elephants in costumes, and she legit thought that I was making that up. She thought I was just pulling that out of my hat, and she looked over at me like trying to figure out if you're telling me the truth or if you're being serious, because I honestly have no idea. And I was like, listen, I don't know about in The Mandalorian, but at least in A New Hope, they were real elephants, and I will show you. Anyway, that's beside the point. Tonight we have one primary source we're going to be talking about, not examining in deep detail, but when it comes to the what if, the alternate timelines and legends, we're going to talk about a little bit more than others. And besides that, we're going to have some fun with questions that we've created. And please feel free in the chat if you have your big what if questions. What if this went a little differently? Put those out for us, and we might tackle some tonight. No promises. Because we might even have too many in the show notes. We are tackling tonight, Freddie, the top 10 what if questions in Legends. Number 1 on the list for me, this is probably the one question that I think about more than anything else in all of Star Wars. Freddie, what do you think would have happened if Qui-Gon had been the one to actually follow through and train Anakin? What if he had... What if Obi-Wan had made it through those big red, what do you call those friggin' things? Yeah, what are those even doing? I don't know. What if Obi-Wan had just ran a little faster and had made it and had been able to help Qui-Gon out a little bit earlier in that duel? What if Qui-Gon hadn't died and had been able to train Anakin as a Padawan? How do you think that would have altered the entire Skywalker saga? Starting off with a softball question here. And do you want to say thanks, Andrew, for those bits, man? Glad to have you here with us. Thanks for celebrating the show. All right, Freddie, what do you think? What would have gone differently had Qui-Gon not been was stabbed through the chest, through the gullet?
Through the gullet. Yeah, this is a good one. I feel like Anakin would have totally been a different person. I don't know how tempted he would be with the dark side still, because Qui-Gon was very much his father figure, right? And he regarded him as such. So Obi-Wan had to step in. He's like, I don't know if I'm ready to train this kid, etc., etc. And he says it at the end. You were like my brother, whereas that family feud thing might not have happened with Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon might have been able to tame Anakin. But that's a good question. This is a hot one because I feel like if that dad figure stayed in Anakin's life, he might have not gone to the dark side as easily as he did with Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I like that point about him being a father figure because Obi-Wan becomes more of a brother. I hadn't thought of it in that way. And I will say, disclaimer, with all 10 of these questions, there's actually more than 10, but I wanted to call it a top 10. So don't count too closely. I do want to say there is no right answer to any of these, much like when I ask questions in Bible class in church. Sometimes I ask questions and everybody knows I've got an answer in mind, and so nobody wants to answer. That's not what tonight is, okay? Tonight is just pie in the sky, trying to figure out, we're reinventing Star Wars, all right? And so what if Qui-Gon had trained Anakin? I've always wondered how much Obi-Wan is responsible for the major problems in Anakin's life. The coldness that he shows to him, at least at first. He didn't approve of Anakin being picked up on Tatooine. He didn't approve of Qui-Gon defying the council to train Anakin. Anakin clearly picked up on the hostility. The Jedi Quest books by Jude Watson, which I love, it really delves into, especially the beginning of that relationship, how there's not a lot of warmth between the two of them. Master and Apprentice, most recently, but that's canon. We won't talk about it too much. Wrestles with the difference between Anakin and Qui-Gon in their philosophies, their ideologies. Qui-Gon very much a rebel, Obi-Wan very by the books. I wonder what if Anakin hadn't been trained by such a straight-laced Jedi? Would Anakin have still fallen to the dark side, Freddy? I've got an answer in mind here on this one. So I want to know what your take is before I crack the whip on the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good one. I feel whether he was destined to be coaxed into the dark side or not, that's a good question. But I definitely feel like Qui-Gon would have made a difference, and in order for us to experience that difference and that heartache, because imagine seeing that father figure die, that just propelled him to feel even more, right? And we all know that Anakin had a lot of feeling, and they the Jedi tried to take that away and say, don't feel this way about that. And he had a lot of sentiment and passion towards a lot of things, and that was just one more thing in his life. So if you take that away, he might not have, but I mean, if his mom if his mom still, you know, died and he found out about it, I think that might have been ultimately his question, but
Hmm. I My answer is that Anakin still falls to the dark side. He still becomes Vader because the irreparable damage that's done is the fact that he had such a close relationship with his mother and that they rolled the dice in order to save one of them, right? And so the fact that he has to leave his mother behind and he's consumed with grief over his mother, of course, when she dies. And Cheryl says, debatable. That's very true. All this is debatable. That's the entire point. That's the entire point. I do like Cheryl's answer there. She says Qui-Gon's death filled him with even more fear and doubt, which I think is true. The amount of trauma he went through in such a short period of time is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. But for me, I think his relationship with his mother is primarily the reason, and it leads into Padme's, the whole thing he has with Padme. Do you think that Qui-Gon just bats an eye at Anakin and Padme's relationship like Obi-Wan does? Freddy, do you think that goes the same way?
that would have been a good question. I don't know. That's a tough one. I feel like he would have definitely tried to curb it, but in a fatherly way, right? Or if, like,
He's kind of
love
a
is
rebel,
love.
though. I mean, he, he
Yeah,
he likes to defy the council.
he does.
Maybe he picks up a lady along the way too.
Maybe he has one.
He
We don't
does in
know.
Legends. He does in Legends. I forgot her name, but he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's blind, right? Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
get to those sooner or later in the Jedi Apprentice books. All right, you want to lead us off? That's a great question. Maybe we should have started with an easier one. In the YouTube edit, we'll stick it later in the episode. So what's number 2 on the list, Freddie?
Yeah, so this is a good one. By the way, hi Joxy, just came in the chat. I saw that. So this number 2 is this is a good one. What if Dark Empire was as important as the Thrawn trilogy?
I forgot
And
that I
what
wrote
if
this question. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what if Zahn never existed?
Yeah.
Would there be a thriving EU today
Wow.
as the world builder that Zahn was?
What a great question. An incredible genius must have written this. I love it. I love it. If you think about it, we've been talking about the Thrawn trilogy in recent weeks. In case you've been living under a rock, we are deep in the middle of the Thrawn trilogy, doing 6 episodes on 3 books. And if you play your cards right, you could have a 7th. Who knows? I'm excited to have Cheryl joining us to talk about the last book in that trilogy. Cheryl, of course, says blasphemy there in the chat by saying that Thrawn is better than Dark Empire. Bro Dameron says Dark Empire is better than Thrawn. I think they're both incredible in such incredibly different ways, right? Obviously, one of them makes a bigger impact on Legends continuity, right, Freddie?
Absolutely. I mean, we'd be remiss to say that without Zahn and the Thrawn trilogy, we would not. I mean, you look at it; they had to bring it back into canon. That's how much they knew the importance of Zahn and Thrawn.
Yeah, that's true. You're not going to have, here we go. You're not going to have slimy naked Palpatine brought into canon anytime soon.
Not again.
However, you had something pretty close in The Rise of Skywalker. He just, wasn't slimy or naked, but he was
He was-
craggly.
He was craggly and gross and
Yeah.
broken.
That's a good point. Thrawn has made a tremendous impact, but not just Thrawn. The world building of the trilogy itself was so impactful that in my opinion, it sparks the entire Legends EU to come. If you look at what had been published beforehand, you had the old school Han Solo books, the old school Lando books, the Marvel comics, and that's about it. I mean, you've got the radio dramas. There's not a whole lot more. You got the Ewoks and Droids cartoons, which would you count those as Legends, Freddy?
I guess so.
Do we dare claim the Ewoks and Droids cartoons? If Trevor's listening to this, he says you better claim them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's not especially easy to make that call. But there was something culturally that happened when Heir to the Empire was published. It, of course, reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, beating out a brand new debut by Stephen King, I think, which is incredible to think that he would top him. I'm not totally sure I've got my facts right there. Somebody feel free to correct me in the chat or the YouTube comments or the Discord or Twitter. Throw your complaints wherever you want to throw them. I'll catch them. It'll be great. I'll throw them right back at you. Thrawn has such an incredible impact, but you know what? Being published right at the same time is the Dark Empire comics. They came out at a very similar time to the Thrawn trilogy. What if that was the direction that the EU went? What if all of Legends was as dark and broody as Dark Empire, Freddy? Do we ever get the what, hundreds? We have almost 200 Legends books. Do we get such an expansive EU if there isn't a Thrawn trilogy?
I don't know, because if you think about it, so much came from the Thrawn trilogy. You've got Mara Jade, their whole thing, and just all of the things that come from it. The twins, right, from Leia, and that storyline, the planets that we visit, the everything. I mean, there's so many things that Zahn captured inside of his books and his trilogy that that who knows what would have happened. And of course, if we had Dark Empire, we would have had who knows how many naked palps we would have had throughout the history of EU.
Yeah,
he could have had planets worth of naked palps.
Oh, let's not go down. That's too much. All right, I will even say that's too much. One room full is all you need, right? Or is it a ship? Is a ship full? Meg is like, can you please change the subject? That's fine. We've really stirred up a hornet's nest of controversy in the comments here with the debate that's going on about the Dark Empire and the Thrawn trilogy, and I love it. Love to see it. So everybody be respectful of each other.
Yeah, we're not trying to say that one is better than the other. We're just saying, what if what if, I guess, one took over the other in terms of popularity, etc. I mean, we all know Thrawn is great. We know Dark Empire is fantastic. Without those, we wouldn't have as much content to talk about. But yeah, we love them both, and we're just take it lightly.
Part of the reason that I bring it up, Freddy, is that although retconned and acknowledged in a couple of places, Dark Empire is largely relegated to secondary status within Legends continuity. It's not like the official story. As best I can interpret this material, it's like we're getting into the scholarly weeds here. Feel like I need to be down in the basement in the Harvard library, which is where I go to do my research for grad school. I'm not a Harvard student. I just get to use the library, which is cool. It could, I feel like as we're trying to interpret this material, that Dark Empire is always kind of looked at as is the term redheaded stepchild offensive? That's not PC anymore, is it? Probably shouldn't say that. What's a better way of putting it? Like the toothless second cousin that you don't really acknowledge. Maybe that's just an Arkansas problem. Moving on. It's definitely an interesting question, and I love the debate that's happening in the chat. We can continue it in Discord. I do like the point that Skooma Joe makes. Black Sheep. There he goes. Skooma Joe says, let's call it the Black Sheep. Yeah, that's a lot better. And is that racist? That might be racist. Oh, man. I'm getting sweaty. I will say I like the point that Skooma Joe makes about the fact that there was a novel adaptation of Dark Empire, which was planned, but then was scrapped in place of Heir to the Empire, which I did not know. And we'll have to research after this episode. That is incredibly intriguing. Number 3 on our list, though, going a different direction. We're leaning now, Freddie, into what I would say is the most well-established what-if stories in all of Legends. Dark Empire is never called a what-if story. These explicitly are. We have comics that were published between 2001 and 2003. It's called Infinities from Dark Horse Comics. And the basic premise is, what if one little detail had gone just a little bit differently? What if one little thing had happened just a little differently? How would that have changed the course of one of these beloved Star Wars films? How would it have changed the course of the galaxy? Does the timeline right itself? Do things bounce? Do they snap back into normal? Or does the entire timeline diverge? And the first of these questions, of course, coming from the Infinities adaptation of A New Hope, is this: what if Luke didn't blow up the Death Star? Right? What if when he goes to fire that second shot, use the Force, Luke, and he is going to somehow get that proton torpedo to just do that perfect 90-degree turn right into the hole, and it gets that perfect shot on the Death Star? What if he pulls a rogue leader and it just skims the surface? Negative, it didn't go in. Is that how would that change the course of A New Hope? What do you think happens after that? Of course, we both have read this book, but how would that change Star Wars if Luke didn't succeed at blowing up the Death Star?
That's a good one. So what I really like at the beginning of Infinities, it it describes that every single event in Star Wars is a chain of events that have happened. So what happens if the chain breaks, right? And you go a different route, and it discovers that. So the first one that we see is, what happens if they do not blow up the Death Star? And it's pretty inevitable that they're going to blow up the planet, right? That planet is going up in flames. They may not have the well, I think that's the second one actually. I can't remember, but the planet would basically explode. They'd have to get whoever
they
they
would
could,
destroy
right?
Yavin 4.
The Yavin 4 would be gone.
Right.
And who can we get off this planet as quickly as possible? There's not going to be much.
Yeah.
Transport 1 is away is literally all you're going to get. You're not going to get 2 and 3. So they're going to have to sacrifice a lot of people. And
It's
what
a
you're going to
massacre.
see,
Yeah.
it's a massacre. And what you're going to see is basically what we saw in the sequels, right? It's just, there's probably like 5-6 people left after that, because everyone
after
else
the
died.
resistance is decimated.
Exactly. So
yeah.
and it's going to take a different path, because one, you have Tarkin, who's still alive, and
Right. Establishes
and
a major villain in A New Hope and is not in the rest of the original trilogy, which
Yeah.
I'd never really stopped to think about until I was reading Infinities this week, getting ready for this episode, and I realized, oh yeah, Tarkin is going to have a much bigger role. I still think that Infinities missed it with Tarkin. They did not know what to do with Tarkin. They were like, we got an extra villain. Anybody need a villain? We got villains over here. What an incredible actor he was. And yet the writer, hey, has his work cut out for him in trying to write the what if for A New Hope here. Now, Rob Neese makes a great point. He says that that R2 is destroyed, that that Leia is killed. And there's a lot of people dying in the chat. Goodness. Yikes, what a dark timeline this is. In Infinities, Leia actually makes it onto a shuttle to evacuate. However, most of the rebellion does not, or at least that cell that is there on Yavin 4. So, they kind of need Leia to survive. However, Infinities Empire Strikes Back kills off Luke in like the second page.
that was fantastic.
I was like, oh,
the way
yep,
it
he
happened.
dead. Is he dead? Yep, dead. Totally dead. Luke dead. We'll get to that in a second. Freddie, how do you think Infinities A New Hope handled this? How well did they tackle the idea of there being, a splinter universe if Luke doesn't destroy the Death Star? Were they successful at this? Were they not successful? The basic idea is that Luke eventually makes his way to Dagobah and spends 5 years training under Yoda, becomes this fully equipped Jedi Knight, goes in to, try to destroy Darth Vader and the Emperor. And then a spoiler alert for Infinities. All right, 20 seconds here if you want to borrow this on Marvel Unlimited or something. Yoda crashes the Death Star into Coruscant. Or no, he crashes the Millennium Falcon into the Death Star. Is that right, Freddie? I'm getting my
So
who crashes what
okay,
mixed up.
I
At the
think what
end of
happens is
Infinity's, Yoda does a
yeah.
kamikaze.
So basically, what happens is and I'm trying to remember. I just skimmed it, and I think what's going on is we no longer have the rebellion, so Luke does not have to worry
Right.
about getting everything started, so he can spend the time to become an absolute master on Dagobah. Takes off with Yoda on the Millennium Falcon, goes to Coruscant, and there's like hundreds of star destroyers, etc., and
Right.
goes and does a Jedi mind trick on Tarkin
Okay.
and
Yeah.
blows
Right.
up everything. Just uses the Death Star to blow everything up. And I think he blows up. I can't remember the end actually. I'm kind of blanking, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure he just
Yoda.
used
He uses the Death Star to just shoot its laser all over Coruscant. Right.
yeah, just destroys Coruscant, destroys all of the vehicles, all of everything, and destroys the whole empire just right there. Yoda himself.
Yeah, besides the fact that Yoda hitches a ride on the Millennium Falcon and is basically the hero of the story, which really undercuts Luke's hero's journey, I found that to be a little bit comical and bothersome, honestly. Besides that, the story ends the same way. There's a medal ceremony after the Empire is defeated. The one thing about that story that I found the most remarkable, though, was Leia's arc.
Oh yeah, that
Um,
was crazy.
Leia is captured by the Empire in trying to escape from Yavin 4, is then taken in by Darth Vader, who reveals the fact that she is his daughter and wants to nurture her and raise her to learn the ways of the Force. Basically, he holds her captive on Coruscant. She at first wants to resist, wants to leave, and they just brainwash her. It turns her into a dark Jedi. She ends up having to duel against Luke in the climactic battle, in which case Vader and Leia both flip. So we kind of do snap back. Do you think that that's what happens ultimately? That our heroes basically have to follow this course that fate has laid out for them, even if you tweak one little detail, or do you think that we get more creative liberty than that?
That's a tough one. I think there might be some inevitability with Leia, or at least Vader turning right because the Palps does not
Yeah,
want Luke to be a good boy, and in order for him to do that, he either has to kill Luke or punish him, and you can tell Vader's not down for that. So yeah,
yeah,
it's tough to say. It's a good question. That's another what if scenario.
yeah. I think that's true. That Vader is destined to flip, right? That Vader is destined to redeem himself. So let's talk about that. Let's move into the Infinity's Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. So our number 4 is what if Luke died and Leia saved the galaxy? And this
It's
is
really
yeah,
It's really
Infinity's.
amazing in the beginning of Infinity's Empire Strikes Back, published in 2002. The basic idea is, what if when the Wampa... I absolutely died reading this. I was like,
Me
this is the
too.
detail you're going to change? I think the idea here was, it's one little thing that has massive consequences. It's also something you can change in the very beginning of the film. You've got to change a detail very early on so that the entire story is different, right? So this is one thing. Luke is in over his head. He's dying there in the Wampa cave, and or the Wampa's esteemed abode. Sorry, I don't want to offend any Wampas. He's got to be refrigerated in the or warmed. He's got to be, what's the word that you use when you're like taking a casserole to a potluck and you got to put like that heat pack on there to keep it warm just long enough. Well, that's what Han has to potluck Luke in order to get him to the potluck in time, right? He sticks him inside the belly of the Tauntaun. So the one detail that's changed is, what if the Wampa, uh, what if Han's Tauntaun doesn't survive, right? What if you cannot stash Luke in the Tauntaun and Han gets there to rescue him, and instead Luke just dies in the snow? What happens after that if Luke dies in the first act of The Empire Strikes Back, Freddie?
Well, the funny thing to me is reading Infinities and looking like maybe like 6 panels in, and Luke is dead. You're like, what? Out of
Yeah.
all the things, that's what it was. uh, how different the story would be from there, because what he told, what if you remember in Empire Strikes Back, he tells Han, Dagobah,
Right.
Jedi, etc. And then of course Han's like, oh, I'm gonna be a Jedi.
Yeah, I know. I got a huge kick out of that. Han
Yeah.
is like kind of nervous, kind of excited, like he's on his way to the first day of school, like that
Yeah.
kind of anxious feeling of like maybe I'm gonna be a Jedi. And he turns to Leia. He's like, "Hey, what kind of Jedi do you think I would be?" And she's like, "Not a very good one. I gotta tell you, not great." They get there, and Yoda immediately he doesn't play any games with Han and Leia when they get to Dagobah. He instead is sitting on the beach. There's a beach on Dagobah apparently. He's sitting on the beach and he says, "Yoda, I am a Skywalker. Are you?" And starts to train Leia in the ways of the Force. And Han's like, "Oh, she's gonna be the Jedi, huh?" And so he just straight up leaves, just abandons Leia on Dagobah. 6 months later, some time passes. He comes back to pick her up. She's a Jedi. The last thing she's got to do is confront Vader. And we can pretty much leave it for there. Don't want to spoil all this stuff, right, Freddy?
Yeah, it'd be fun to actually go through a lot of these in detail one of these days.
Yeah, it would. We
There's
could
a lot
totally
we're not
tackle
covering.
them. And the Tales comics also. I know that Andrew, who's with us here tonight, loves the Tales comics. He especially loves Skippy the Jedi Droid. We could talk about those one day. This is very similar to those. Like, they're not especially consequential for the Legends universe as a whole. They're just kind of fun stories. But it is really cool, really gratifying to see Leia step up to save the galaxy as a Jedi. It's one of the fun things about Legends. You don't get a ton of that in canon, but different authors handle Leia differently in Legends. There's just more authors at the table. And so, of course, the Dark Nest trilogy, boy, that one's wild. Leia trains as a Jedi. You've got a little bit of Leia doing some Jedi stuff in Heir to the Empire. Some authors handle her more on the political side, more on the Jedi side. This one really leans into it all the way. She's got like a pink, maybe purple, could be blue lightsaber. I don't know. I'm colorblind, but it's awesome. I know that much. Definitely a fun story. And the final of these 3 stories from Infinities, we talked about A New Hope, talked about Empire Strikes Back. The third from Return of the Jedi, the basic question of what if Vader... No, the basic question that's asked in Return of the Jedi is not one of our what if questions. So I will say about Infinities, the basic question is what is it? What's the detail that's changed in Return of the Jedi? Right. Oh, it's what if the sail barge assault is not successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if Luke and Han and Lando, or what if Luke and Leia and Lando and Chewie, they fail at rescuing Han Solo from Jabba's palace? The basic idea is that, Boba Fett escapes with Han in carbonite, and everything spirals out of control at that point. What you think of that one, Freddy?
Yeah, that was pretty interesting too. After reading a lot of these, you realize how many times Luke, Leia, and Han had the opportunity to die. There were so many places for them to just perish, and you're it's a fragile life, and the fact that they all live to experience every single thing, all the way up into the sequels, right? You're like, man, the amount of times they were almost assassinated in Legends books, or whatever it is, and then reading Infinities, they're just, I don't know how they're getting by. The Force, I guess.
You know what Cheryl's question is about Return of the Jedi? I love this. She says, "What if the Ewoks ate the heroes?" That's a great one. An absolutely great question. Yeah. Well, that actually does tie into the way that Infinity's Return of the Jedi handles everything on Endor. There are no Ewoks in this story. Hey, if your biggest gripe with Return of the Jedi is that you don't like Ewoks, this is the story for you. It's Return of the Jedi, but no Ewoks, which goes to show how much of an uphill battle the Rebels have on what is that planet called? Endor, the forest moon of Endor. And what an uphill battle they have without the Ewoks on their side, because it's a trap, right? You want to say it, Freddy? It's a trap, right?
It's a trap.
There it is. Love Freddy's Akbar impression. Besides that detail being different, the one other major difference, besides there being a lot more Boba Fett doesn't get knocked into the Sarlacc pit. So if you're wanting more Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi, this is the story for you. It's a lot of fun. It's Leia stealing Slave One, which is really cool to see. I mean, it's a pretty wild fantasy, don't you think, Freddy? Leia flying around in Slave One?
Yeah, this one's pretty fantastic.
There's no gold bikini, though.
No gold bikini. Not this time.
Not in this one.
There's a trade-off. You don't get Ewoks, and you don't get the gold bikini.
The Return of the Jedi question I want to ask, though, is not the same as what they ask in that story. I don't really think that was the best change to make. However, the one thing they do really differently in Infinity's Return of the Jedi is at the end. There's a huge spoiler. Luke and Leia are confronting Vader and Palpatine together in this. Leia goes in to try to rescue Luke, who's walked into a trap. She learns that he's walked into a trap and has been captured. So in this battle, they're appealing to Vader's fatherly sensibilities by saying, "I bet you can't kill both your children at once." And he's like, "You know what? You're right. I won't." Palpatine escapes somehow. That's never especially clear. It's never never especially clear in this story. But then at the end, this is amazing. Everybody deserves to Google this. We'll put it in the show notes if we remember. For our audio listeners, Vader is saved by Luke and Leia. They are able to carry him aboard the Millennium Falcon because he has not been fried by Sparkle Fingers Palpatine's Force Lightning. They're able to get him on there. His breathing apparatus has not been destroyed. He's been wounded in the battle. And then he is ready to serve the rebellion as a reborn, Vader fighting for good. And he's in the Vader armor, but it's like bright white. He's like Gandalf the White, but Vader. I mean, how awesome is that, Freddy?
That's pretty amazing. Yeah, I thought that was so cool. Just seeing a white Vader, just sparkling, glowing, pure, good. It's imagine how powerful he is now too. I mean, he was powerful as a Sith, as a light Jedi, or back in as a Jedi.
Yeah.
It would be fascinating to see what kind of powers he would. Battle meditation, right?
One of the things about it, oh my gosh, battle meditation. Vader would be great. No, Vader probably rolls his eyes at the battle meditation, just like I do. You imagine like Clone Wars Anakin trying to sit still and use battle meditation, for crying out loud? Not a chance. Not a chance. I bet you Tara Sunube is good at battle meditation. He likes to sit still in his library. Anyway, this in Infinities isn't especially played out. That's where the story ends, is the reveal of Vader in his white armor. I'd kind of like to follow up the sequel, which is the fun of this episode. We get to do a little bit of speculation, a little bit of what if. The reason I want us to talk about this, though, Freddie, is actually sparked by some discussion in Conja Book Club this past Saturday, where they talk about Dark Disciple, Quinlan Voss, and Asajj Ventress. They also talk a little bit of the theme in Rise of Skywalker, how Ben Solo is, he dies after coming back to the light. And they talked a little bit about how in Star Wars, we don't often get to see living redemption. You know what I'm talking about? You don't often get to see villains try to redeem themselves through life, through good deeds. Instead, you find them redeeming themselves through death.
Yeah.
Which is very much a product of our Western culture, and Christianity's influence. And I realize that we can show some creativity in our storytelling, though, right? You can have living redemption. It's really neat to think about Vader getting a chance at that, don't you think?
Yeah, it'd be. I think it would. It's sad to. Well, the cool thing about that, and I'm just kind of going through it in my head, is Vader would definitely be the master to Luke and Leia, and that would be interesting to see.
Sure,
their father
the
working
dynasty.
Exactly, and how I mean, if at that point the Force needs balance, so having 3 Skywalkers on the light side, like what's going to happen on the other side now? That would be an interesting thing to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. So that one, I think, for me, was the most thought-provoking out of the 3 volumes. Freddie, let me ask you, out of Infinities, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, which one did you like the most? And which one would you be most likely to actually sit down and just enjoy?
I actually liked Return of the Jedi, but I thought it was just hilarious when Yoda was mind controlling or Jedi mind tricking Tarkin and just blowing everything up. And
I was like, yeah, Death Star laser just going off all over Coruscant.
Yeah, and Charles mentioned in the chat, it doesn't seem like a very Yoda thing to do. So it was kind of funny to watch and just seeing everything explode and just picturing what would happen. But I would definitely like to see a white suited Vader. That would be really awesome.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure there's like a Funko Pop of a glowing white Vader. And if there isn't, there will be one tomorrow. They're always cranking out more of these bad boys. But in just a minute, we're going to come to the question at the end of the show of what would you do for your Infinity takes on the other 6 saga films? Because they, as far as I know, there's only Infinities for the original trilogy. So it gives everybody in the chat a minute to think about what their questions would be. How would you slightly alter something within the first 10, 15 minutes of episodes 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9? And how would that alter the story? How would that alter all of Star Wars? We'll get to that in a second. Before we do, the other book, the other story that's included in the Marvel Epic Collection, Infinities, is not an Infinities story. It's in fact called The Star Wars. And that's right. I said The Star Wars. What do you know about The Star Wars, Freddie?
So this is actually one of my favorite ones. I bought this
Oh,
one
is it?
specifically, yeah, because I loved the I guess it has a lot of the old McQuarrie art from the original stuff, and that's
Yeah,
definitely some
yeah.
of my favorite. So I bought it because of that.
Like Anakin Starkiller.
Exactly, Star Killer, and then you've got Lizard Han, I believe, and
Yeah. You've got the Zeb Chewbacca.
Zeb, yeah, which we see in other things, and it's such a different take because it's George Lucas's first draft. So what if that first draft had become
Yeah.
Star Wars as we
Right.
know it?
Yeah, it's really, really off kilter, isn't it? It's really odd. You've basically got to get invested in this whole new set of characters. It's hard to think of them as the same characters. It's a big what if. Hey, if this has been an interesting episode too, you can pick up that Marvel Epic Collection with the Amazon affiliate link through utini.com, and you can check this one out. Let us know what you think. We're not going to dive very deep into this story because I like for us to do it on its own unique roundtable episode. What I will say about it for now is this: it's a good thing. It's a real good thing, Freddie,
Yeah,
that he continued to iterate on those drafts,
thank goodness.
because this reads as obtuse, obscure sci-fi, almost like high medieval fantasy, instead of the Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers kind of cowboy fantasy
Yeah,
space opera that is Star Wars. Right? You think that's a fair assessment?
that's a really good assessment. And for those who saw the rough draft and thought you're on a good path, I congratulate them for keeping those iterations going and
Yeah.
getting him to change his story. But yeah, it I don't know. I don't think Star Wars would have been as popular with that first draft.
Yeah, I think that's true. But this really came late in the Legends continuity. Dark Horse took a chance on telling this story, and I'm glad that they did. It was published 2013 through 2014. The author who adapted this is, I call him Jedi historian J.W. Rinsler. Jonathan Rinsler used to write for Star Wars Insider magazine. I think he was the editor for Insider. He wrote those those massive behind-the-scenes tomes on the original trilogy. So awesome guy, did a great job on these, and totally worth checking out. Freddie, why don't you tackle number 6 on our list? If you're keeping count with us at home, I messed up the list. We're one off. I think this is number 7 for tonight. It's number 6 in the list, Freddie. What's our next
so
question?
Number 6 on the list is what if Luke turned to the dark side at the end of Return of the Jedi?
Yeah,
And what would
this
his
is
Darth name be?
yeah.
As
So
a
the second question, right? We got what would, if Luke turned to the dark side, what would his Darth name be? So everybody give a minute to think about that. First, I find this one, Freddie, to be really, really thought-provoking, because that moment at the end of Return of the Jedi is so pivotal, isn't it? And Luke has given in to the dark side. Yoda has warned him, and warned him. And Luke is so headstrong. He's like, I'm not going to turn to the dark side. I'm not going to turn to the dark side. And he does. He's just slashing and hacking at Vader. And you can cinematographically, is it cinematically? There we go.
Cinematically, yeah.
Cinematically, the tone of the end of Return of the Jedi, everything happening there on the second Death Star, it's just getting darker and darker and darker. It's very dark. They're down underneath the catwalks of the throne room. Luke is he's seething with anger. It's palpable if you rewatch it. And it's when he sees that he has harmed Vader and he has cut off his hand, and he looks down at his own hand, that he realizes that he has become his father, right? He's down that dark path. And as he throws the saber away, which is my favorite moment in all of Star Wars. Absolutely love it. But what if instead of just cutting off his hand, he cut off his head, right? What if he went for it and this was something that was thrown around back in about 1980, 1982 when this was being drafted up. This is an idea that Lucas played with. What would happen, Freddy, if Luke went full dark side? What does the galaxy become?
I think that's where we would see some of those infinities things come to light, and we would see Leia, the other Skywalker,
Okay, sure,
try
yeah.
to save her brother. And
All of the infinities keep coming back to, and Leia
Yeah.
trains as a Jedi.
Yeah, and I mean, we see that a lot in Star Wars. Is she's very much a Skywalker, and she has all of the capabilities that Luke has to be a good Jedi. And I feel like that's probably what we would see. Is we would see her, very similar to Dark Empire, come in and talk with Luke and get him to come back to the dark side, or to the light side, right, to the rebellion.
Yeah. So Luke is the one who's redeemed instead of the Redeemer who redeems Vader in your version.
Yeah, I would say so.
Wow, I love that. Love that. I wrote the question. I'm not even sure what my answer is. Other than I wonder what the galaxy would be like. Luke doesn't seem like the way he runs the Jedi Academy, both in Legends and canon, not the best at managing staff or students. I can't imagine he would be a very good emperor if he if he dethroned Sidious. I imagine Sidious is more likely to just do the whole essence transfer thing, or Luke is just going to have to be the Vader to Sidious's hate to say it, his reborn slimy naked body, as he's has to. I imagine that the Dark Empire story becomes a little bit more prominent if Luke turns the dark side, because that's pretty much our closest version of dark side Luke in Star Wars storytelling, don't you think?
Yeah, I
And
think
it's
so.
debatable whether or not Luke ever really goes dark.
I think he touches it, but I don't think he really goes into it.
Yeah, he's skirting with it. And in that story, Leia is the one that has to save him. So I think you're right there, Freddy. So we've already got some great answers coming in the chat. If Luke turned to the dark side, what would his Darth name be? This was a late addition to the show notes because I went down a Reddit rabbit hole. Those are always dangerous. This one was kind of fun. And I think I'm going to go ahead and give the cake to Bro Dameron. Bro Dameron, that's an excellent answer. Did you see this, Freddy? What would
Krayt.
his Darth Krayt? I mean, Darth Krayt is his own villain, but he comes from Tatooine. You got the Krayt dragons; they're pretty villainous. Brings us right back to the beginning of the show, doesn't it?
Darth Sunburn.
Krayt dragons. Darth Sunburn. He's very fair skinned. Mark Hamill. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I saw a couple of other good ones online. Feel free, everybody, to put your answers in the chat. Okay, in the Fate of the Jedi series, Ben Skywalker, Luke's son, makes the joke that if he went to the dark side, he would be Darth Starkiller, which once again is a throwback to the original draft of Star Wars, right? That's the name of Luke? He's Anakin Starkiller.
Mm-hmm.
In the initial draft. I love that.
Yep.
The way that Starkiller gets the nod. Any other ideas, Freddy?
What about Darth Clamorous? Clamorous means cry in Latin.
Oh, wow. You put some thought into this, man. That's excellent. Here's a couple of other good ones from online. Darth Tashi Station. The one that I liked was Darth Farm Boy. It doesn't especially sound epic, but it's all I can. I'm stuck on it. Absolutely stuck on it. You be respectful in the chat there, Andrew. He says Legends rules, canon rules, and hey, well, this is the Legends show. Be careful, we like both over here. Pretty sure he's joking. Let's see. We've got some great answers coming in. Meg, do you want to take a stab at this one? You got an idea? What would Luke's Darth name be? Here's a good one. Darth Wormy, a way of kind of taking his nickname from the deleted scenes in A New Hope. You got one, Meg?
No.
That's fine. I didn't warn you.
Thinking.
Yeah, we can continue this conversation in the Discord channel. This would be a great week to chime in over there. As we wind down our list, we have covered some great territory. We've talked about A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back. People have turned to the dark side. People have been killed unexpectedly. Leia has saved the day over and over and over. As we wind down our top 10 list, here's another good one that I came across on accident. in the middle of the night on Reddit. It's the way that the best ideas come across you. And this is a question I've seen tossed around a lot. And I think it's even mentioned multiple times in the New Jedi Order. What if Palpatine was still in power when the Yuuzhan Vong attempted their invasion?
Oof.
You ever really thought about this one, Freddie?
I've thought about it, and it's really interesting because, I mean, the Yuuzhan Vong, you can't detect them in the Force. So Palpatine may or may not, depending on his dark arts, may not know they're around, and it might be too late. And I've been thinking about this for a while, how the events would go down, and especially it's important when it happens. But I'm just thinking, like, if the rebellion was around, and uh, and Palpatine was around, would they work together to defeat the Yuuzhan Vong?
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay, maybe. It seems to me that the idea that's established in the New Jedi Order is that Palpatine was aware of the Yuuzhan Vong, and one theory on why Palpatine consolidates power the way that he does is to be able to prepare the galaxy to be strong enough to withstand the invasion of an enemy force like the Yuuzhan Vong. It's a huge retcon, of course, but it kind of works to think that the Empire is able to, have a strong enough fleet to repel the Yuuzhan Vong. I think in that series, somebody who's reading it, we've got several Utini members who are right now. If you come across one of these passages, be sure to share it in the Legends Lookback Discord channel. But the one thing that stands out to me as especially true, even if Palpatine isn't able to withstand the Yuuzhan Vong, you know who could, Freddie? Thrawn.
Yeah.
Don't you think Thrawn would have been the commander who could have? And the reason is Thrawn is good at understanding other cultures. And, massive spoiler for the New Jedi Order series. I'll say this in 10 seconds, and then you can come back. The war is won by becoming culturally sensitive to the Yuuzhan Vong and figuring out how to, instead of judge them for their faults, to instead be able to learn a little bit more about how they became the way that they are. In a nutshell, there's a lot more. There's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But Thrawn would have figured that out in 10 minutes, don't you think?
I think so. He just would have to look at some of their art, and that was it. That'd be it for them.
Just look at their art. Yeah, hey, somebody bring me some of their art. And imagine the Yuuzhan Vong walking in with what are their sticks that turn to snakes called?
Yeah.
I imagine
like
them
eels,
walking in
right?
and being
It's
like,
an
we'll
eel.
show you art. Ah! They're just incredible villains. Love that. So if Palpatine couldn't, Thrawn definitely would.
Yeah.
Freddie, number 9 on the list as we wind down. Let's come back to our Infinities question. People have had a few minutes to think about it. If you could choose, I'm going to change the question just a little bit, Freddie.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you could choose one of the other movies we have that did not get an Infinities adaptation, so one of the prequels or one of the sequels, what is one thing you would tweak in one of them? What's the one Infinities story that you would write for one of these other movies?
I would definitely. So it's so funny that we just talked about the Yuuzhan Vong and what ifs, because I always thought, what if we saw the Yuuzhan Vong in one of the later episodes, right? One of the sequels. Because I really like the Clone
I don't want to
Wars,
see
right?
him. I don't want to see the Yuuzhan Vong. I don't need to look up those nostrils.
I think they'd be a lot like Hellraiser. Just those weird creatures, right? Masochists. But
I'll have to Google it. I don't get the reference.
Pinhead, he's got all those pins coming out of his head.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, it would be pretty creepy to see them. There's no doubt. But I would like to see what would happen in a situation where you have an empire or the First Order and a rebellion or resistance trying to fight a common evil, but also fighting each other and trying not to, obviously they must come to a point where they're like, okay, there's no way we can just beat these guys alone. And how interesting it would be to see that kind of inserted in one of the moments. Just imagine them fighting, right? The First Order and the Resistance just fighting furiously, and all of a sudden you just see the Yuuzhan Vong come in. You're like, oh
man. Yeah, that'd be a great ending for Rise of Skywalker. It's one of the things I like the most about. It's one of my favorite Legends books, Vader the Jedi Allies. One of my favorite things about it is that you do see, at least in this one book, the Jedi and Sith team up against a greater threat. Dun dun dun. We'll leave it at that. I've thought a lot about what's one detail that I would change to tweak one of the other movies. The only things that I can think to tweak in the sequels are things that happen like late in the movies. What if, and this is what kind of what I expected. What if Luke came to save the day at the end of Episode 7? I imagine the when the saber was jiggling in the snow, and it starts to fly through the air. I was like, this is it. Luke's going to save the day. And I think in hindsight, it was better that it wasn't Luke. I think it was better that it was Rey's big moment. Rey needed to be the hero of that movie. Us fanboys, we wanted to see it be Luke. But I think in the greater scheme of what they were trying to establish, it was better for Rey to be the hero of her own story instead of Luke just save the day again, which is kind of where these Infinity stories fall flat for me. Yoda is often the one saving the day, which, hey, he deserves his moment in the sun. But what are your ideas? What's the one thing that you would change in one of these? And it has to be within the first few minutes of one of the movies. What's one thing that you would change to totally alter the storyline? I think for me, the one that I will give is this. In Episode 1, I would have Obi-Wan get off the ship. I'd like to see Obi-Wan take a more active role in what happens there on Tatooine. I think that would have made for. Obviously, I like what happens between Qui-Gon and Padme and Anakin, but love me some Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan. Don't you, Freddie?
Yeah, I love Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. There's a couple of Obi-Wans that are always in my head. One is Ewan McGregor, and of course you've got going back to the Clone Wars cartoons, because those, you see more of them. I forget James Arnold Taylor, I believe.
Yeah,
Jat,
right.
Incredible Jat. So, I always picture their voices in my head. And of course, you've got Ben Kenobi, but that's not my Obi-Wan.
Right.
In terms of, when I'm thinking Obi-Wan, I'm thinking those other two. When I
Yeah,
think
isn't that
old
incredible?
Ben, yeah,
Right, we grew up with the original trilogy, and yet our Obi-Wan is not primarily Alec Guinness. That's incredible. All right, we got some great answers coming in the chat. Yeah, like me, Skooma Joe is stuck on trying to change things late in the movie. Says he would have liked to see Kylo Ren survive. You and everybody else, Skooma Joe. You and everybody else, my man. But that's why we have the EU, right? We can have some what if, some fun storytelling. Now, I guess the ultimate takeaway in all of this, Freddie, is that your enjoyment of Star Wars does not have to be limited to what's actually committed to the screen or to the page. You can have fun because all of this is faking in space, and you can play around with the story some, don't you think?
Yeah, that's what I like about Legends. Is you kind of, as much as I like canon and keeping with a consistent story and trying not to retcon as much as you can and keeping everything in a nice orderly fashion, it's nice to have these what if stories and have these things in Legends that exist that people are arguing and talking about today. And it's like, come on, guys, there's a comic book for that.
Yeah. That's absolutely true, and that really leads us well, Freddie, into the last question for tonight, number 10 on the list. And unless it's not, and I've miscounted, in which case that's fine. Our video editor will fix it in post. You're welcome, Nathan. What if Disney hadn't bought Star Wars? Now, I don't mean this to be a bash fest by any means, so you keep your comments in the chat decent and in order. But I mean it in this way, thinking about its impact on the Legends universe as we know and love. What would the EU look like today? It's now been 6 years since Legends became Legends. Now we've had a incredible amount of excellent stories told in canon. Legends, in some ways, has aged well. Other books have not aged as well. Legends, in some sense, has been incorporated into canon. We just saw Palpatine resurrected. We've seen Thrawn come back on the screen. Solo was just full of Legends stuff. We've got a lot of it referenced and incorporated. Other parts that have not been touched at all. We're about to get the High Republic. The Old Republic hasn't been touched at all in the last 6 years. So, Freddie, what do you think happens to Legends if April 2016 or April 2014 didn't happen? Right? What if Disney had not relegated Legends to Legends?
Everyone would have gotten 20 copies of iJedi as a thanks from George Lucas himself. Just kidding. No, this is a good question, because eventually Lucas would want to retire, right? He didn't want to give that much control away of his creation, but he would still be in the background. I believe we would have seen we probably would have seen Dave Filoni. I'm going from the business side. I'm not going with the story side, but I think
Yeah, that's fine.
Dave Filoni would definitely be the creative and the master, right? The maestro of Star Wars. So we would have seen a lot of the similar content that we would have seen in Clone Wars. 7, 8, and 9 would have definitely been touched differently, of course, way differently.
Yeah, right.
Which would have been interesting to see what I'm pretty sure I've looked into him, but I can't remember. George Lucas did have some ideas of what he wanted, so those existed. But so we would have seen.
And in some ways, the elements of what we get in the sequels do come from George's ideas.
Mhm.
It's amazing to see. I would say the best source on that is probably the Art of books, right?
Yeah.
Those really get into the behind the scenes story treatments and George's role alongside. So George was working on his own treatments for 7, 8, and 9. So if that didn't happen, you think we still get 7, 8, and 9, but just different?
I think we would get them. We would definitely get them, and they would be different. Don't know how exactly they would be different, but yeah, it would be interesting to see those come through. I don't know if you look at the recent history of Star Wars, and I'm talking about like the Jedi or the Jedi, the Disney acquisition. I was gonna say the Jedi acquisition.
That
Uh,
sounds fun. I'd read that story.
yeah, the Disney acquisition. What it did was it brought more people into the game. We saw a
Yeah.
lot to begin with, and I'll just give you an example. When I went to Celebration 4, 5, it was still the same people. I saw the same people, still a lot of people, but there were the same faces that I saw. But once Anaheim, 6 and Disney rolled around, my goodness, the amount of different first of all, the amount of people was significant. It was exponential. And totally, you would see the old faces again, but then there was completely new people involved, and that's what Disney did was it brought more fans into Star Wars, and I don't know if we would have seen that with George.
Yeah, I think that's true. It was good in terms of bringing in more people. I think as time went on, the slice of the Star Wars fandom that was enjoying and participating and engaging in Star Wars, especially the EU, was shrinking. And so this was a move that made it bigger. And a couple people have made great points in the chat. Skooma Joe and Cheryl, I really agree, both of you. Really, hey, look at me. I agree with Cheryl. Look at this. Because she says, I'm honestly glad Legends is Legends. And we're getting all the great stories that we are now getting written by a lot of talented people. And I think Skooma Joe is also saying that the idea is that we needed to close the canon on Legends, as if that's not confusing enough, because there was just such an incredible amount of continuity.
Yeah.
For me, it was exciting to know, okay, it's done. It's over. I can actually finish this story. I can finally get caught up. And that's why I read, I think, 50 Legends books in 2015. Whew, what a year that was. Not quite reading that much anymore, but definitely enjoying it. And that's kind of our perspective on Legends here, is that it was good that they moved on. Nevertheless, I would, of course, like to see some of these characters and stories fleshed out in greater ways in future years, but there's always a chance. I'm not going to be tweeting at Del Rey about it every day, though, either. And so we've got some great content we've talked about tonight, some huge hypotheticals. Let us know what's your question you'd like for us to answer. What's your big hypothetical? What's your what if with Star Wars? And we can talk about that on our listener feedback show. Lightning round, Freddy. As we wrap up the episode, I'm going to ask 3 final questions. All right, these are super serious and super important. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Number 1, what if it had worked out between Mara Jade and Lando? They have a bit of a romance in the Jedi Academy trilogy. No, that's just a joke. That one's just there for Cheryl because she hates that storyline. I had to do it. What do you think, Freddie? You want to chime in on that one, or just let me slide on by it?
No, I mean it would have been different. Mara Jade and Lando, they just don't fit.
It's not quite the same as who Mara ends up with.
No. It I think it would have just fizzled out eventually. That's how it would have gone.
Like a fling. All right. No,
yeah, fling.
My impression on that is that Lando's more into it than Mara Jade. We were talking about that some of the Discord today, and she said, "I'm glad we don't have Mara in canon because that doesn't work." I think that's true. Secondly, all right, and this is one I've spent way too much time thinking about the last couple of weeks. What if Corran Horn, all right, the unofficial mascot of Utini, what if Corran, he's one of the first Jedi to be fully trained in Luke's new era of Jedi that he's training. However, he's not a Jedi who really gets along with or likes Luke very much. What if, something happens to Luke along the way? Maybe he retires. He goes off to Octu or to Dagobah. He just, he's sipping margaritas in his space hammock, and with his bride, aforementioned, she does end up with Luke, right? The point, of course. What if Luke steps out of the game and Corran Horn takes over the Jedi Order? What if Corran Horn is the Grand Master of the Jedi Order in Legends?
Oh man. It would be, I feel like the Jedi Order at that point would be more like a fraternity house, and they'd all be competing with each other to be the best.
That's so true. Yeah, it's like Rogue Squadron at its worst moments. Yeah, when he's just always suspicious of everybody because he's a detective.
What color do you think their cloaks would be?
I think he would enforce a Jedi Order wide uniform policy.
Sunglasses?
No. Just that everybody is wearing green Jedi robes all the time. Doesn't he have green Jedi robes? Isn't that a thing? Pretty sure that's a thing.
Yeah, I could see that.
Green Jedi robes. It's like he's an Eagles fan or something. I don't know. One final question, Corran Horn related, in our lightning round here, Freddy. What if it didn't work out for Palpatine? Luke didn't especially succeed on the throne. What if Corey Helton became Emperor of the Galaxy? What would the universe be like if Corey was Emperor?
Let's just see. It would be like now. I'm just kidding. We would get videos on how to do everything.
Oh yeah,
we would know how to do everything because of our little
how to
videos
file your taxes. You get a video.
We would learn how to invest.
How to build your own CrossFit gym. You get a video.
Yeah. Everyone would be forced to do CrossFit.
Everybody would have terrariums. No, we love Corey. Grateful he lets us do the show. Just had to throw that one in the what ifs. So everybody, if you have enjoyed this episode, you can of course check out some of the books we've talked about in this week's show. You can find the Infinity Stories for A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and The Star Wars in the Marvel Epic Collection Infinities. That's probably the easiest place to get all of them. We've also talked a little bit about Dark Empire, specifically the first in the series, and talked a little bit about the Marvel comics as well. And if you are interested in some of these, you can head on over to utini.com and check them out. And if you've read them, you can leave us a review. And then we always like to plug our reading collections. Isn't that right, Freddie? I love my collections,
Yeah, and you said it yourself. The amount that we had at the very beginning when we started versus now, it's incredible.
Yeah. Meg and I did a count earlier this week. We're nearing 100. Is it possible to have 100 by the end of the year? Probably not. Am I going to try anyway? Absolutely. And so in particular with this episode, we've got reading collections on Corran Horn, on Palpatine, on Thrawn. We don't have a what if reading collection. It's just a few, but maybe one day. What if there was a what if reading collection? Next up, as we've talked about a little bit in the chat tonight, we are going to be doing the 2-part roundtable with our incredible patron Cheryl Bell to join us for The Last Command, because I don't know about you, Freddie, but it's been too long since I've had Sabaoth in my life.
I know. I every time I don't read about Sabaoth, my abs shrink by 1.
Were you down to like 5 abs?
No, I got 0.
Love that. Absolutely. Well, nobody's got abs after coronavirus. We've all been at home, not exercising. Well, that does it for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Legends Look Back. Thanks especially to Meg, our producer, who has made the show run this week, and also to Nathan, our video editor, who cleans up this mess behind the scenes. Thank you especially to our incredible patrons who keep the lights on for us. And now, of course, that we're live on Twitch, you can help us out by subscribing, either the old-fashioned way, with subscribing with actual money, or you can take that money from Amazon and subscribe with your 1 free Twitch Prime gaming subscription a month. Of course, if you've got feedback for us and want your question read on the show or your thoughts heard on air, you can email us at legendslookback@utini.com. You can contact us through the Legends Lookback Discord channel, or you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Jared Q. Mays. Freddie?
At Wake Up Freddy.
Almost missed your cue there, man. And
Yeah, I know.
and Meg is
At McDowell.
awesome. If you are looking to buy some of these books, want to review these books, whatever you want to do with these books, you can find that information over on utini.com. And another way to help us out and show your love of Utini is by grabbing some swag from Teespring. We've got some awesome merch specific to our podcast as well as Utini as a whole. We're nearing the holiday season. I'd encourage you to be doing all your Christmas shopping, your holiday shopping, on utini.com. I mean, our designer Jose, he's always cranking out new merch, isn't he? Just incredible stuff. You can get your hoodie, just not the one that Freddy's wearing, because that one's retired, I think.
Limited edition.
Yeah, you have to do a bid war with Freddy in order to try to get that one. If you want to get your hands on that. Also over in the Legends Lookback Discord channel, we've got a brand new Mara Jade emoji. And if you want to use that, you can join our community. There's a link on utini.com. Of course, everybody, it's been an insane week over here in the U.S. at least. And we want to encourage you with Legends Lookback and Utini as a whole to please keep that Utini fan code and be a force for positivity in the fandom. See you next week. May the force be with you.